Professor Freedman, it is such a delight and honor to be able to speak with you today regarding your tax career. I mean, I think when people think of corporate taxation or international taxation, your name is amongst the top of the list as a giant in this area. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm not sure about all of that, but it's very lovely to be with you all.
So let's start discussing your road to Oxford. My first question for you is, why did you decide to specialize in corporate tax, international tax? What particularly drew you to the area, and what do you love about it?
Well, when I was in practice, I really enjoyed tax because it was an area where I could get my teeth into something very meaty. Many other areas, because I was a solicitor rather than a barrister, it was really a lot of work that was with standard forms or dealing with clients, and I preferred not to be with the clients but to be with the books, to be honest. And so in tax I felt I was a bit more left alone, so I developed a bit of an expertise in tax in a small firm when I was training, and then moved to Freshfields, which is a big London city firm, where I went to the corporate tax department, and that's where I began to learn about corporate tax. So I didn't study tax at university. It wasn't available when I was at university, and therefore I feel I've come a very hard way to tax, but I really learned it in practice.
That's fantastic. And I think your story tracks with many other stories I've heard from other tax practitioners, that they just kind of fell into tax, but that the occasion was a happy one for them. So my next question for you is, what prompted you to enter academia from Freshfields?
As I said, I liked books a lot more than people, and I was better suited, I think, to an academic career. It was also pretty tough in practice when I was in practice in the early 1980s or late 1970s. I was the only woman in the department for a long time. It really was very, very hard. I couldn't see myself having a family and staying in practice at that time. Now I look back on it, I think, maybe I shouldn't have given in, but it was honestly very hard without any other women. And but I don't want to make that a negative story, because I also positively wanted to study tax and to be learning about tax, and I felt I could do that better as an academic anyway.
I hear that. Now, within your experience at Freshfields, I mean, from your observation, do you believe that you were the only woman because women weren't encouraged to enter tax, or that they felt intimidated by the area, or that they weren't encouraged to practice tax law in a corporate setting?
It honestly wasn't only tax. There were very few women solicitors in big city firms anyway in those days. I don't think tax is particularly discouraging, and I think actually many women do like tax and are very good at tax. So I don't think that was the problem. I think it was a more general problem of big city firms, and the whole setup was not and still is not really very encouraging for women, particularly women who want to have a family, unfortunately.
Right. Yes.
It's a lot better than it was, and great strides are being made, but could be better.
I hear that. Now, you were definitely instrumental in making tax at Oxford what it is today. So I'm hoping that you can walk me through the process of deciding to create the two big programs that you had a hand in. So the Center for Business Taxation, and then also the Master of Science in Taxation.
Okay, well, I came to Oxford in 2001, so I'd already been teaching tax at the London School of Economics for 20 years. by the time I went to Oxford. The opportunity came up to apply for a chair in Oxford. The chair was sponsored by KPMG. They were quite forward looking, I think, in believing that there wasn't enough tax teaching going on in the UK. I applied in the normal way. I was not a KPMG employee or anything like that. I was it was all completely above board and done according to normal academic rules. So the name KPMG did not fetter me in any way. It was simply that they were very generously providing the funding. Having got to Oxford and having been elected to the chair, and it was the first statutory chair that any woman in the law that any woman had held in the Oxford Law Faculty. So I was quite proud of that. I then went about building on what was already there. So we already had a personal tax course in Oxford being taught by very able colleagues. So I left that alone and I focused on corporate tax and introduced the corporate tax course onto the BCL, which is Oxford's flagship graduate degree for lawyers. But that was limited because we really only had space for 2 options in tax on the BCL, and many people applying for the BCL didn't want to do tax, and I didn't have any kind of control of how many students I had year on year. Gradually we built up a group of us. So at first I was somewhat on my own, although with these other colleagues who were mainly property lawyers who were also teaching personal tax. But we then managed to recruit other tax people, my colleagues Glenn Lutzenheiser and Dr. John Vella. And once we had a critical mass of people, it was possible to think about putting on the MSc in tax. And that was very much helped by having, by that time, the Centre for Business Tax, which I had been one of the people who set that up, raised the funding and got that set up at the side business school. So we then had economists as well. And I really think to teach tax well, you need an interdisciplinary approach. So it was great to be working with economists on setting up the MSc. But I should say one more thing about the MSc, which is that it was essentially Philip Baker's London MSc, which we took over into Oxford. So Philip has to be given enormous credit for that degree. Transferring it to Oxford was very hard work, and we had to make a lot of adaptations, and it's more interdisciplinary than it was in London. It is different from the London degree, but Philip's work was the core of that degree.
Fantastic. That's quite a journey. So at Oxford, what were your favorite courses to teach and why?
Actually, I really love teaching undergraduates tax because they don't come to it with as many preconceptions, and they are not immediately thinking, how can we apply this in practice? So you can ask some more open questions. But I really love teaching undergraduates, but we try to transfer that over into the tax MSc by making everybody start from first principles and asking questions which are surprisingly new to some people. So I always think of them as very basic questions that we ask in our residential first week, which is called Tax Principles and Policy. And we start by asking really, really basic questions about what is tax. And we have many very people who are already quite distinguished practitioners doing the course. And I think, oh dear, they're going to think this is very, very basic. But actually, they really like the opportunity and the space and to discuss those bigger questions.
Well, it's fantastic that you provide the space for people to approach tax in an intellectually curious manner, rather than, as you were saying, approaching it from a rather transactional standpoint and figuring how various rules or laws will immediately apply to their facts. So that's very refreshing to hear. Now, you had touched a little bit on this, but I wanted to circle back to the bigger question of, as a woman in tax, What obstacles would you say you have encountered in your career, starting from your student days, through the law firm and into your eventual academic career? And what advice can you impart to women who are embarking on a corporate law journey, on a corporate tax journey, in terms of finding mentors and sponsors and persevering through any sort of quote unquote glass ceiling issues that they may encounter along the way?
Well, I'm quite nervous about giving advice to people now because obviously conditions
Mm,
were different in my day. So I would not want to, I think there's a real danger that people of my age start to give advice based on what they did or the problems that they had. And I think it is much better now. I'm not saying it's easier, but I think that women work together much better because
mm,
there are more women. So in my day, I was always told not to join women's groups because it was the men you needed to talk to get promotions. And therefore, and we really didn't have very many women's groups because we didn't have very many women. So trying
mhm,
to get together women's groups wasn't particularly successful. What I've learned now from my younger colleagues is that working with other women and networking with other women can be massively useful at this stage of development because there are senior women around and there are very impressive junior women who can network together and have more impact together than on their own. So I would say work with other women. Um, and learn from other women, but don't be put off by older women like me and our experiences because hopefully things are changing. However, I would say that I am disappointed that things haven't changed more than they have.
I hear that. And I love that advice to draw on other women and rely on other women. I mean, at my company, Tax Notes, I would say that we are a very female forward company. So definitely my career has been boosted by many women in tax surrounding me. Now, I wanted to move on to some general reflections on your career. So, when you take a step back and you look at all that you have accomplished, what would you say has been the most rewarding part of your career?
Wow. Well, I actually think meeting so many people from all around the world has been an enormous privilege. And that's the result of being a teacher. And I don't think I would have done that had I stayed in practice. And it has been wonderful to get to know people from most countries in the world, really, and very, very able people as well. So that is a privilege to be constantly with young people, ambitious, lively young people. Um, that's something that now I've retired, I miss. I miss being with younger people. I don't want to be with old people of my age all the time, and so I love it when I get the opportunity to come back and be with younger people again. So that's the biggest thing for me. It's the people you're with who are the most important, I think, in career in the end.
And I have to say that's also very generous of you to be so willing to um, help mentor the younger generations and to want to foster those relationships with lawyers who are on the up and up. Now, of course, I also have to ask you, what would you say has been the most challenging part of your career?
There have been many challenges, so
Mm,
I think it's pretty hard not to say that having children at the same time as trying to pursue a career is very tough, and it always has been, and there's nothing new about that. Um, so having a husband who did his share was really important. Um, but having children is really rewarding as well. So one just has to work out how to do it. And I do think that's improved. I was not entitled to any maternity leave at all with my first child,
oh,
um,
wow.
and only 3 months with my second child. So I would say take your maternity leave, take as long as you are able to. Enjoy being with your children because I think I missed out on that. but I'm making up for it with my grandchildren now.
Oh, lovely. How many grandchildren do you have?
I have 5 grandchildren, and I love
Oh,
spending time with them. But it does make me realize that it would have been good to spend more time with the children. And at the time when you're deep in your career, you think, I just haven't got time for this. But it is important to try to get balance, and it's also very difficult. So get as many people around you to help you. Family are great. If you haven't got family, then pay for help, because to pay for help to do the things you don't want to do, so that you have time to do the good things with the children.
well, thank you for that very honest answer. That's really appreciated.
And they don't go away once they're not babies, I would say. I mean, I hear a lot of that, people wanting more maternity leave and how difficult it is to have a baby. And of course, that's true. But actually, the children need you when they're older as well. So don't assume that somehow you're going to go back to how it was before once they become 10 or something.
That's a very good point. A very, very good point. Now, along those lines, could you kindly share any career moments that you are particularly proud of, either from a technical standpoint or an interpersonal standpoint, or even both?
Wow. I think I was very proud of being on the GAR committee in the UK, which proposed the introduction of a general anti-avoidance rule, or general anti-abuse rule, as we call it. I very much enjoyed being on that committee with some of the top minds from our judiciary and the bar, and that was very stimulating. Being part of that was great fun. I've enjoyed engaging in policy issues throughout. And I also am very proud of the Oxford MSc, because it was a lot of work to put it together and to get it through Oxford committees. We had to go through about 22 committees to put it up, and not everybody was in favour of the idea. Amusingly, one of the questions I was asked by one of the committees was, is it a good idea to have this new degree, because it is bound to be biased away from women, that you won't get women to study this subject? And given that I was leading it, I found that extraordinary, an extraordinary assumption that women wouldn't study tax. But it is true that we don't have as many applications from women as from men. But we do have really good women studying tax on the course. I'm pleased that we have opened access to Oxford, because it's also possible now to get to Oxford without going through some of the hoops that people have to go through usually to do a degree in Oxford. So I think we have opened up access quite successfully with this degree. And it's a great degree, and we have wonderful teachers on it, wonderful external teachers, and my internal colleagues are wonderful. So I feel like a parent whose baby has grown up, because it can run very happily without me. And though that makes me feel a bit sad in a way, because we all like to be needed, I'm also really proud that it is now a really independent degree that has a life of its own, and I think has a wonderful group of alumni as well. So yeah, I am proud of that.
Well, I think it's tremendous that you were able to persevere through those 22 you had mentioned committees. Yeah. Also, quite surprising that the assumption was that women would not sign up, especially, I think that assumption is especially surprising given that you were at the head of this whole project. I would think that would even be encouraging women.
It was peculiar. So I would encourage women to apply to show them that they were wrong.
And they were wrong.
Yeah.
Now, when you were rising up in your career, what did you want to be known for? And when you look back on everything that you've accomplished, would you say that is the same as what you are now known for?
I was always so busy that I didn't really think about things like that. And I think you younger people are much better at thinking about a career in big ways. But it was such a fight, really, to have a career at all. that I think I was just pleased to be hanging on in there. But I think being the first statutory chairholder in the law faculty, the first woman statutory chairholder in Oxford, is great. I think my written contributions on legislation and on tax avoidance, I'm proud of, and hope that they will go on after me. But generally, I think just being remembered for having done the job that I did well, and I hope that's what people think I did.
I think it's safe to say that that is what people regard you for. Now, to close, would you say that you had a guiding philosophy for your career? I know you said that you were kind of in the weeds and just, pushing through. But was there any one philosophy that kind of helped propel you through every stage?
I guess if I had a philosophy, it was that I wanted to show that tax was not technical and boring, and that it really is an enormously wide, rich, deep subject to and important subject to study in an academic way. And when I say academic, I don't mean irrelevant, but I mean in a really scholarly way, where we think about history and we think about the interconnections, and we don't just think about what it is going to bring tomorrow. And challenging preconceived notions. I think I was always up for challenging preconceived notions, wading into other areas of scholarship if I needed to understand things, not sticking to my box. That makes it harder if you don't stick to the box you're in, but it also makes it much more rewarding.
I love that. I love that you have provided a roadmap for other women in tax or other tax practitioners generally to, as we had mentioned before, be intellectually curious about tax, approach it from an interdisciplinary angle, and figure out what corner of this very vast and wide subject speaks to you and hone in on that. So again, Professor Freedman, we are extremely grateful for your time and for your sacrifices and for all of the wisdom that you've imparted to the many, many students you've touched over the years. So we thank you so much and congratulate you on such a robust career.
I've enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.
Wonderful.